Hi, I'm Casey, and I don't know what I'm doing. Today we're going to do my February wrap-up, but we're going to do things a little differently. I can be extremely long-winded when I'm talking about books that I've read, and with the number of books I've been reading each month, it has just gotten a little out of control to do my wrap-ups talking about every book. So we're going to try something different. I watched Meg With Books, one of her more recent wrap-ups, and I noticed that she did a very fun format where she talked about all the books she read and just quickly went through them. Then she listed like her most disappointing, her favorites, the worst, her most surprising, and I thought that was a really fun idea, so I'm totally stealing that. I'm going to link her channel down below. She's absolutely fabulous. If you haven't already heard of her, checked her channel out, you really should. So we're going to quickly go through the books I read. We are going to start with any books that I did not rate, and then we are going to go from lowest star rating to highest star rating. I almost did that in the opposite order because I'm silly. The book I did not rate this month was Yoke, My Yoga of Self-Acceptance by Jessamine Stanley. The 2 stars I had for this month were Hide by Kirsten White and In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. My 3 stars this month were Playing Possum by Stephanie Rabick, My Soul to Keep by Tanana Reeve Dew, When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, and The Posthumous Memoirs of Bras Cubas by Machado de Assis. My 4 stars for the month were Shame is an Ocean I Swim Across by Mary Lambert, The Zoologist's Guide to the Galaxy by Eric Kirschenbaum, and Spying on Whales by Nick Pennison. My 5 stars for the month were The Removed by Brandon Hobson, Against White Feminism by Rafia Zakaria, Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones, Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. So we're going to start with the kind of most negative and I think work our way to the most positive because I think it's going to be fun to end this video on a positive note. The worst book that I read in the month of February is Hide by Kirsten White. This is a horror thriller fiction novel following a group of young 20-somethings that have been recruited to star in a reality television competition show centered around hide and seek in an old abandoned theme park. The story takes off from there, but overall I found this to be so lackluster and boring and just insubstantial in so many ways. I thought the plot was really lacking. I think that the characters were completely flat and one-dimensional most of the time. Sometimes they would be two-dimensional. The overall narrative and themes I really didn't like. I won't say I didn't enjoy, but at this point in time I can't even remember any of them. I read this first thing in the month of February and it just completely flew out of my head. It was a fine time. I had the audiobook. The audiobook was fine, but it was really, really boring, and I really wanted there to be more punch. I wanted more character. I wanted more from the plot. I wanted the horror elements to be more. If there was going to be cult, I wanted it to be more culty. If it was going to be a little bit cosmic or demonic, I wanted more of that. If we were going to have this element of, you know, what would you do to win this competition and what that can bring out in people, I wanted more of that, and there was just not enough of any of it, unfortunately. And that's why it's my worst book of the month. My most disappointing book of the month was Playing Possum by Stephanie Rabick. While this was 3 stars, I really just need to tell you the synopsis. We're following multiple POVs in here, but Vanessa is a young woman living with her uncle and aunt in a small town. And in this small town, Vanessa has found the love of her life in a young woman named Tiffany. And strange things begin to happen, and they begin to center around the possums that are in their their small southern town. I don't know what more synopsis to give you because this is relatively short and that would probably ruin a lot of the surprise. If you've seen some of my other videos, I can't remember specifically which ones now, I talked about The Rue by Alan Baxter, and these two have a bit of a connection. The cover for that one and the cover for this one were both designed by, I believe, Keelan Patrick Bird, and he put those designs up on Twitter, and both authors took them, and I think it started with The Rue, and then they made fun novellas out of them. While Alan Baxter, I think you could tell, publishes books fairly frequently, and I think it was actually not a self-published book. I think it was published under a publisher. This one is self-published, and it really shows in here. There are a lot of typos. There's a whole sentence that goes from, I can't find it now just off the top of my head, but there's a whole sentence that goes from I believe this is the Arabic alphabet is what we call, you know, what English and like French and things like that are written in. And it goes into some, I think it's either Japanese or Mandarin characters just out of nowhere and then resumes back into the previous language. And it was very jarring, very unsettling. There are a lot of typos in here, and all of that I could have dealt with because it is self-published, but unfortunately the characters are very boring, they're very flat, and the story really didn't do a lot for me, where I thought that the Rue had a lot going on and really was leaning into how fun and silly and goofy it was. This one ultimately didn't take itself too seriously, but it also didn't take itself, you know, too not seriously either. It had this very unfortunate middle of the road approach to it that I found to be not enjoyable. A section I thought would be fun to add in here would be my most meh book of the month. If you're like me, you read a lot of books that kind of just fall to middle of the road and you get to the end and you just go, meh. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about those as well. The most meh book I read in the month of February could be literally any thriller I read. Thrillers and I don't really get along. They lose my interest. I don't find them engaging or interesting after a certain point. And this all held true for everyone I read this month. Hide by Kirsten White, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead, and When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. These were 3 very different books. I've already talked about Hide and the problems I had with it. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife was very much I see why people really enjoy this if you're really into kind of like ridiculous thrillers that just kind of take you on a ride the whole time. This could be very much for you. Unfortunately, that's not for me. I didn't find it fun. I found it really silly at times, and I really didn't like the characters. As much as I love unlikable characters, there was nothing in here that really entertained me with these characters. They just sort of were really unlikable without any sort of self-awareness or anything. It was overall very disappointing. And When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, I really wanted to read it because this is a story and a thriller centered around gentrification. And I thought that, oh, this is just such a great vessel to talk about this really important topic. This was a great vessel for that story. But unfortunately, I really wanted more from these characters, and just as thrillers do, at some point in time, it just really lost me. And that's not anything about this book. That is totally on me and my engagement with this kind of media. So if you're interested in watching, please don't let this review dissuade you from that. Okay, on to the more positive things. My most surprising book of the month was Spying on Whales by Nick Pennison. This is a nonfiction centered around whales. This is a paleontologist who studies ancient whales, and it is talking about a lot of his research and a lot of just the very interesting facts about whales. I have had this on my shelves for a really long time. I want to say at least over 5 years. That might be a little ridiculous. Let me see when this was published. Math. Yeah, I guess just about 5 years, maybe 4. This has been on my shelves for so long that I really thought that I was just going to hate this because I don't trust past me's book taste in certain aspects. For nonfiction, for some science fiction, and for a lot, like for horror, I feel pretty set, but there are just a lot of things that I think I thought I would be interested in, or I was just starting my foray into them, and I read them now and I'm like, wow, I hate that. You really had no idea what you were looking for. And I thought that's what this was going to be, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I thought this was really engaging. It was really interesting without being too convoluted or too into the minutia of the science of it. It gave a lot of really good information, and I just found it to be really enjoyable and really, really fun. On to my best books of the month. I am going to do a tie because I'm really silly and I really cannot pick between the two of these. And one thing I also want to do for these wrap-ups in the future, with me trying to read more nonfiction, and in particular nonfiction every single month, I want to do a best fiction and a best nonfiction. I think that would just be really fun. So my best fiction of the month is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. I don't think anyone should be surprised by this. I listened to the entirety of the audiobook the day it dropped, and I was absolutely in love. This is the sequel to Jones's My Heart is a Chainsaw, which was published a couple of years ago. We are still following Jade Daniels, but this time she's making a return to her hometown, and things are happening. There's a serial killer on the loose who might be coming into her town. There are some spooky things. There are some really terrifying things, and overall, I found this sequel to be so good. If you didn't enjoy My Heart is a Chainsaw because you didn't think there was enough blood, gore, violence, this is everything you're gonna want. If you didn't like My Heart is a Chainsaw because it's so in Jade's head the entire time, then you might like this one a lot more. We have more characters, we have more people's perspectives. Overall, I thought this was so good. I thought it was, again, really meta, really engaging, really funny at times, and really heart-wrenching. Stephen Graham Jones just writes characters that I care about, that I love, and that I just want to engage with, and I want to read about them, and I want to see what's going on in their lives. I cannot wait for the third book in this trilogy. I really loved it. I really could just go on and talk about how I think, to an extent, I don't know if Jones started this book before My Heart is a Chainsaw was published and people began to give some criticisms, but it felt like some of this was reactionary in a very meta and funny way of, oh, you don't think there's enough blood and guts? Well, here, we're going to start from the beginning and it's not going to let up. Oh, this is just entirely in one person's head? Well, how about we're just going to be in multiple people's head, but every time you change perspectives, it's so singularly focused on their perspectives, and it's so beautiful and glorious. There is so much about Jade, and it was so beautiful to see how much Jade had grown up and how much had changed for her and the ways in which she wanted to change, and she made efforts to, but how it is so hard sometimes when you go back to your hometown or the place you grew up or around the people you grew up to easily sort of fall back into that person you were so long ago. It just, oh, it was beautiful. It was chef's kiss. It was immaculate. I cannot say enough incredible things about this one, and I could just go on, so let's not. My favorite nonfiction for the month was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I had a few nonfictions that I probably could have picked from, but I think ultimately I'm giving it to Know My Name because of how powerful and how incredible it was, not only written and presented, but just the story was, and I think how many people can really resonate with it. Know My Name is a memoir from Chanel Miller, and she, I don't know if you say is or was in this situation, but she was the Emily Doe in the Brock Turner, the Stanford swimmer rape case that happened so many years ago here in the United States. This was her memoir from the day it happened until very recently, right before it was published, because it's not just the sentencing and the having the charges filed or the judgment passed. It is with you the rest of your life, and it is watching as the country just tore her apart for no reason, and the impact that she made sharing her victim statement with people, and it is so beautifully done. I don't think I can do it justice to talk about, because I think I would have to talk for a really long time in really inarticulate and in eloquent ways to talk about how much this just stayed with me, and the ways I was listening to the audiobook for this and the author narrates it, and hearing her voice crack. She goes through the experience of this and relives it, was so impactful and so incredible, and it was amazing. I cried multiple times while reading it. I can't say enough really positive things about this one. It's incredibly difficult to read. It's very hard to read, and it was something really, really meaningful and something that's going to stick with me for such a long time. And I know this probably means nothing from someone on the internet who's just random and silly and posting a video years after it was published, but it really meant a lot to be able to read someone's story like that and really, really see how much she put in to this and how much it was for her to explain and talk about this whenever you're having to go through a trial and you can't. It was everything. It was incredible. Okay, that got a little more somber than I intended it to, but we're going to call it here. If you have any questions about any books that I didn't talk about in this video, please leave them in the comments below. I really hope you're having a great day. If not, I will see you the next time I do one of these. And I hope, and I don't know, do algorithm things. Go get a coffee or a boba or pet a dog or something. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm rambling. Okay, bye.